what up, guys? Welcome back. We are jumping on right after Paul George makes his way officially to the Philadelphia 76ers, who have just been waiting ultra patiently and left the cap space open. Daryl Morey gets his vindication, I guess. I feel like there's just been so much unrest and general impatience with the Sixers franchise, which makes sense considering all of the moves that have already transpired, particularly in the Eastern Conference. You had the Mikal Bridges signing, Boston bringing back, re-signing Derek White. They're locked in for next year, although there weren't any surprises there. Orlando gets KCP. A lot going on. So why do I think that this new role with the 76ers will be optimized for Paul George specifically? Number one, it's going to optimize his offensive role. And you don't have to look much farther back than literally this past year when, oh my God, Kawhi Leonard gets hurt again. Who could have known? What did we see from Paul George, particularly in that elimination game against the Mavs? Really just doesn't kind of seem to get there. Hero ball really doesn't seem to be Paul George's forte. Relatively evident at this point. That's just not optimized for him. And so he's going into a situation where ostensibly he is the tertiary scorer. I think that's going to kind of wash out his up and down playoff history, jumping on those opportunities that will organically present themselves between defenses scrambling to contain Maxey, who's always running 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then, of course, the hub with Embiid, who is just terrifying in and of himself to score alone. Next, it enables his defense to shine even brighter. Less offensive load, more specialization on defense, more energy for defense. At his build, profile, track record, I just think that this is going to present so many problems, particularly with teams that are heavily initiated by their wings and their forwards. I'm looking at you, Boston. Funny enough, on his really recent episode of his podcast where he interviewed DeAndre Jordan, they were reminiscing about the Olympics when they played together, and Paul said something along the lines of, that team was just so stacked on offense that I really didn't even need to do that much, and they told us, hey, just specialize on defense and make sure nobody scores. And I was like, all right, I'm down with that. That's what it just reminded me of. And I'm just like, yeah, you're going to get your wish, bud. Now you can really focus on locking up the other team's best 1 through 4. So voila. And you're going to have a ton more energy to expend on that end of the floor because you're not tasked with so much offense. So don't be shocked if we somehow wind up talking a lot more about Paul George's incredible defense next year. I don't understand how I've been like the only person who hasn't realized until literally now the eerie similarity in physical build as well as just game on the floor between PG and Tatum. They're like the same exact player. We just saw what Jason Tatum's optimized role was, and it wasn't averaging 28 and 10. It was averaging 21 and 7 and guarding the best 2 through 4, even 5, as we all saw. And that's exactly what you want for his limitations offensively. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. I think Paul George is very similar, right? Tertiary scorer, incredible build, incredible versatility defensively. Give him more energy to hone for defense by offloading the offense with more optionality and firepower and more of a balanced system. I just feel like we're on an inevitable crash course between these two teams. Fingers crossed the Knicks don't fuck this up, because we are going to learn a lot. What'll happen with pretty close to a younger version of Paul George versus this albeit older version of Paul George, with the systems that each of them are within. Tatum's not guarding Embiid. That whole thing where Tatum was guarding the center in order to avoid that switching in pick and roll against Dallas in the finals, made it harder, worse screener, all of that stuff. You are not getting away with that against Joel Embiid. So I think Tatum and George are literally going to have to guard each other. Neither of them have to score as much as we're used to. And each team and respective system is incredibly stacked with talent. Very curious how well Tatum is going to hold up, particularly on the offensive end. Are you going to be looking at Drew Holiday and Derek White putting up 19, low 20s, 4 or 5 out of 7 games. Say what you want about Tatum's offensive production. He's taking the most shots every game. He did not shoot well at all this last postseason, but he's taken a lot of shots. So either he needs to figure out how to effectively redistribute that shot profile to his teammates, or he's going to chuck. And that's going to be right in the grill of Paul George, probably. This is going to be awesome. I just can't wait. This helps Philadelphia, of course, for a few different reasons. One, it installs a more balanced and sustainable offense. I talked about this with Boston this past year. We all knew the decision-making and the offensive burden and pressure late in playoff games was the biggest final hurdle Boston had to clear in order to get the title. And what did they do? They got Jrue Holiday. And he really, really provided an incredible release valve, taking that decision-making burden off of Tatum and Brown and made just everything flow better, especially because he couldn't be picked on defensively. Now you have Paul George in a system with the former MVP who has proven, when healthy, year over year to be developing his awareness, particularly as a facilitator, on top of his unmatched magnetism for atrocious whistles that I fucking hate. You have to draw the line somewhere as far as hating the player versus the game. The dude just gets fucking calls, and that just is what it is. And so you have to give him all of this attention. Maxey is just going to be running triathlons. And then you really just have Paul George, who I personally think is going to be that release valve for that Embiid-Maxey duo. In this past postseason, Maxey's running triathlons, Embiid has a ball, he's terrifying with it within 15 feet. And then what else? It was just Oubre spotting up in the corner and Buddy Hield trying to get open. Like, they didn't really have anything else. Props to Nick Batum for that one insane sequence in the play-in, but shit, you need that third tertiary release valve to step up. Embiid's inevitably going to be too tired or injured to be producing. And so having more of that balance on the offensive end, I mean, it's just going to be everything. I mean, it's going to help Embiid be healthier, provide more dexterity as far as optionality goes on the offensive end. What does that do? That ultimately just makes your offensive potency at the team level that much more sustainable for a deep playoff run. In addition, this boosts Philadelphia's defensive potency, just all-around defensive effectiveness, those instincts, the experience, the know-how, as well as the switchability. Everybody knows Paul George is an extremely versatile defender, and in my own personal opinion, there's just a limitation to how much you can really instruct and develop as far as your defensive potency individually is concerned. While Paul George's offense has been a lot less consistent, his defensive abilities have been ultra consistent, and he has basically, to a genetic level, that instinct you need to be a very, very high level and effective defender all across the array of stages throughout the NBA postseason. Already floor raiser, particularly going against your wing, forward, initiated, and piloted teams like Boston. This is an enormous weapon that Philly now has to somewhat neutralize the potency offensively for guys like Jason Tatum, Paolo Banchero, guys like that. Other just interesting notes. This is totally bonkers. I am not saying this is apples to apples. Please, God, hear me. There's a chance that this Philadelphia team, now since adding Paul George, gives us glimmers of what a Golden State system can look like with the big man passing hub that I think it always wanted. Draymond Green has never been on the short list of MVP candidates, so has therefore never presented nearly as much point of attack pressure as Joel Embiid, and he never will. Now we have Tyrese Maxey, who should just test it out and just go sign up for a triathlon. He'll probably just casually win because I don't think this dude ever stops running or gets tired. Paul George is just 6'8", 6'9", and just enormously long and very fluid moving. And so both of them can spot up very, very effectively. Both of them can also initiate and pull up, create their own shots from beyond the arc effectively. And so if you just start throwing in some of this crazy split action stuff where you are just going to absolutely armbar the defense into picking which guy you're going to try your best to really shut off. Not to mention, both of them are proven downhill threats as well, which I think is another huge key here. There just feels like such potential to rip apart defenses through movement off ball around such an enormous focal point in Joel Embiid, presenting an unbelievable amount of pressure as is. Paul is obviously a lot bigger too, so cueing in on miscommunications on the defensive end when you're running certain off-ball actions and suddenly you have a mismatch, there's your point of attack right there if you want it. And ultimately, it can just serve to make Joel Embiid's guy hesitate for the slightest second, and then all of a sudden it's free throws. Like, done. I don't think, one, Joel Embiid is the passer that Draymond Green is, and neither do I think that Paul George is as good as Klay Thompson and Tyrese, like, whatever. But I genuinely think the amount of defensive strain and pressure from off-ball movement around a focal point like Joel Embiid is at least in the same solar system. Defensively, it just forces you to be absolutely immaculate with switches, communication, and what have you. Maxi's too fast getting downhill that he's going to burn you. Paul is too big that, especially if you do a miscommunication and he gets a mismatch, he's going to shoot over you. Even if you get him straight up, he's quick enough to beat you off the dribble with even a half-step difference. And he's big enough where a couple steps and he's at the rim. And then that plays right into the Nick Nurse thing. I just haven't heard anybody talk about this before, but if there's really any coach in the league that can come up with these kinds of ideas on how to weaponize your three-headed monster of talented superstars and all this firepower, particularly when you have a borderline unstoppable focal point in Joel Embiid to begin with, I think it's Nick Nurse.